Hello, and welcome to Netography's Security Mavericks webinar, Interpublic Group, FICO, and Mercury. I'm Dave Meltzer, Netography's Chief Product Officer, and today we're going to talk about some really exciting, interesting conversation. But first, let's start with some quick housekeeping notes. You'll be muted during the conversation. Use the chat widget to submit questions as you go, and we'll try and leave some time for Q&A. You can read through the rest of it from there. First, before we start with the panelists, let's start by talking about why are we here today. Let me see if I can figure out how to remove the slides before we're here today. There we go. So security's been changing. The way everyone has been working has been changing. The technology we rely on has been evolving. How people are accessing data has been evolving, and the applications have certainly been adapting over time. With the center of cybersecurity gravity, especially network security shifting to the cloud, adjusting how we think about defending against threat actors and attackers is critical. The name of this webinar, Security Mavericks, is no accident. It takes a maverick at times to break from the norms and to try new approaches and break out of your comfort zone. We're honored at Netography today to have three such mavericks today to discuss these topics. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting with Shannon Ryan.
Right on, Dave. I think you really set the bar a little high there, but thanks for that. My name is Shannon Ryan. I'm Senior Director at FICO. I lead cybersecurity engineering and architecture across the board. A lot of time people call us the core security services team, where we deliver all the services that do defend and detect type of services at FICO. Thanks.
Great. Branden?
Hi, Branden, Head of InfoSec at Mercury. I'm always excited to have these conversations with like-minded peers about how security is changing, what we can do, and just kind of get the opinions and facilitate conversation around it, because it's always changing. Everybody does it differently.
And third, Troy.
Thank you very much. Troy Wilkinson. I'm the global CISO here at Interpublic Group. Excited about our conversation today, as you know, network detection and response, as well as the network layer, is very exciting to me, and I think we can do better as an industry. And excited to have this conversation and talk about why that is.
Excellent. Well, let's start the questions then. The first one's going to be to you, Troy. What's been the most surprising thing to you about changes in the security industry over the last year or two? Whether that be solutions, approaches, or the attack surface, or how the attackers have shifted their mindsets?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that everybody in this call would agree that just since last November, about this time last year, ChatGPT was coming out as a thing and has really just taken us into a whole new direction with AI and artificial intelligence, both from a foundational model and large learning models, but also how are we defending against AI? How are we in equipping our teams to use AI to be better, faster, and stronger? So, as an industry, I think that artificial intelligence and really these ChatGPT type tools are going to be top of mind. But if you go back to the core foundational, we're still facing the same issues. If you look at MGM, identity continues to be a challenge, privilege escalation, lateral movement, being able to, exploit a phishing email or a vishing call and then actually escalate to the super admin, that's a challenge for the industry. So as much as we want to think about us looking, going to Mars on a rocket ship, it's really about getting back to the basics. Are we protecting our company? Are we protecting our identities, our endpoints, our network, and our data, which is really core to what we all do in security? So as much as we want to look towards the future, I really think we should focus on those foundationals.
Troy, you say some of those things at the beginning, and I hate that, right? They're buzzwords, AI and ML type of things. But the reality is what's really changed is they become so much more available to everyone, right? We have hobbyists now who can build ML models because it's just that easy, or AI models. And of course, that leads into the threat actor, of course, having these kind of abilities. I couldn't agree more on that.
No, Branden, how about you? Go ahead.
I think, he's right talking about the fundamentals or the foundational principles, but AI is having a huge impact on that. Look at like the Retool breach, where somebody had a deep fake of their IT support voice. So they literally thought they were talking to IT, right? And they followed all of the rules of listening to IT and security. And so like the fundamentals are still important, but we have to think about how those fundamentals play into new technology.
Great. How about the economy? You know, and of course, you know, as much as you can discuss for your own organization, certainly as we've seen, you know, shifts in the economy, and we've certainly seen, you know, for some organizations that's hit internal security teams and budgets differently than we've seen before. Is there something about the macroeconomic conditions that's changing your strategy of how you choose to implement what you prioritize? Branden, do you want to tackle that one first?
That's a very complex question there. There's a lot that goes into that. So, I mean, high level, I would say the economy has some impact, but I think one of the things that we're seeing is more the maturing of the security industry as a result. You know, there's lots of vendors out there, but people are now learning to ignore some of this buzzword marketing and start looking at, again, the fundamentals. Like, what does this do for me? I think another thing that security teams are starting to realize is that just having a tool isn't good enough. You need to understand those fundamentals, understand the networking, understand what this alert is telling you. And so while like the economy is having a play there, I think it's actually helping mature security teams overall by forcing them to do more with the tools they already have and forcing them to actually understand the environments better.
Well, Branden, I agree, and I have so much more to say about that than we can fit in this time slot. But you know, I think that there's some interesting political parts of that nature too, right? When you have people like, what is it, SolarWinds, where they're suing a CISO, I mean, how can your economy really impact your security at that point, right? I mean, we're all becoming very, very aware that security has to be a part, right? You don't want to be that, you know, and Troy, no offense, but you don't want to be that CISO that is downsizing your security team because, you know, of profit things, only to find out that that's, you know, led you to a compromise of some kind, right? But the other part about the economy that's interesting is scale has really changed, right? We've all been joking about scale for years, but now we have really small players. I mean, you know, I consider my company not a really big player, right? I mean, less than 5,000 people in the company, but we are expected to have scale globally across the world. And, you know, our infrastructure providers are finally really allowing us to do that super easily, and it's become expected. So like you were saying, Branden, it's moved us to this huge, big model where we're dealing with lots of data platforms instead of niche solutions. I mean, there's just kind of so much you can keep going on there, right? Troy.
Yeah, I'll just tap on that a little bit and totally agree. No offense taken, actually. You know, I think that any company is looking at this from a security lens and economic. Like, yeah, we don't want to cut our security budget and then have an incident or a breach or a public, you know, embarrassment. So I think that, you know, the industry is looking at staying flat, but we're really driving deep on how do we get more out of the current solutions that we have. We can no longer afford to have shelfware, meaning that we're buying tools we're not implementing 100%, or we don't have 100% of coverage. And so what we've done at IPG is really look at our landscape. What are we using? What can we get more value out of these tools that we've already paid for and invested in, as well as, you know, looking at our partners. How do we, you know, platform play versus best in breed is a constant conversation. And there are cases for both in different cases, right? But if we have partners that can help us get to a better security position by leveraging more of their technology stack, maybe one or two of those components are not best in breed, but they're good enough. I think that people are looking at driving deep with their current partners. Great examples: Palo Alto, Microsoft, Proofpoint. You know, all these they're acquiring companies, are creating this really compelling platform play that customers, I think, are really, you know, driving deep into. So that's for us on the economy side. I do think that if you also look at your pipeline of talent, you know, headcount is key in some organizations, right? So what are you doing to encourage the next generation of talent on your team? And for us, it's this pipeline of internships that turn into entry level, that turn into, you know, a progression path. And so many of the folks here at IPG have been here for quite some time, and they started off in those junior ranks, but have really become rock stars because doing that pipeline of talent, you get to identify key rock stars, highly motivated, highly talented folks that may not have otherwise had a chance to get their foot in the door in cybersecurity. And then you get to invest in them, help get them the training certifications they need to advance their career, and they turn around and be a really good asset for you here. So I think it's important that we invest in our people and our culture to make sure that we're, sustaining through this economic downturn. I think that the whole world is seeing it, not just in a specific industry. Hopefully we'll get some good guidance in early 2024, but I really think that for the next 12 months through the election cycle, we're going to continue to see uncertainty in the financial markets. So you can predict that we'll see uncertainty in our budgets. So really driving deep with the technologies that you have, getting more value. And a great example here is Netography, right? So I had the opportunity to be with Marty Rush at a meeting in Florida a couple of weeks back, and I said, we really need to expand into the Middle East and Israel due to the conflict, and we need to do it now. And he made a phone call, and we were up and running in minutes. Whereas if you look at the way things used to be in this segment, you'd have to have an appliance, you'd have to ship it, you'd have to wait for customs to clear it, you'd have to get it installed in a data center. We could have been weeks away from visibility, but in this time of crisis over there in Israel, we were able to get visibility probably within an hour of me having that conversation. So, again, driving deep in the solutions you're already invested in and those partnerships is so crucial to the success of anyone's security program.
Yeah, sorry, Dave. I have a pretty strong opinion about the move to platform being so much more advantageous than the best of breed, right? We've probably all done best of breed there, but having to identify something in one tool and switch to another tool, it's a game changer, right? Where you have data and you use Netography, and I know that's why we're here, right? But if you have this data and you can supplement or enhance that data to really build it into a platform where you can make single decisions without moving, it changes the rules, right? It gives us so much more ability. But on your economy of the staffing thing, one of the things that has been maybe a plus to some of us is these downsizing events that have happened over the past year or so has made some really amazing talent available to us, right? Talent that we couldn't really get in the past. So there's some huge advantages there. We've taken advantage of that in a good way, I think. Troy, sorry, I have one more thing to add though, and I kind of commend you on it, but we have an amazing CISO today, and one of the reasons I say that is he's very technical as well, and it sounds like you're there. I think that's super key. If you end up with the CISOs in the history where they're very, financial motivated or something else, they don't get the technology, which means maybe they can't represent that to their execs, right? And I think that makes a huge difference in, helping you rise above. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I came from a technical background in law enforcement and cybersecurity investigation. So being able to speak on multiple different technological topics is important to me. But you know what, the most important thing for the success of a CISO is translating complex technical speak to something that the board and a very non-technical board can understand. In every public company, you've got a whole gamut of folks who have extensive background in IT. Maybe they worked at Accenture, Deloitte, or one of these, so they know all there is to know about technology. But then you have the other board member who has worked in retail and has no clue what an IP address is, right? So you have to be able to be very resilient to those conversations and be able to answer in a way that makes sense to the entire board. So I think that that's a great point. It's all about EQ and that emotional quotient, being able to walk in a room and translate and really sense the room. I think empathy is a big part of that as well. You have to have empathy and hear where the other person is coming from and be able to translate what we're talking about in this call into something that makes sense from a business risk perspective, from a financial perspective, which is the language of the boardroom.
Right. Totally agree with that.
And one thing you mentioned, Troy, around kind of career development and early career, we brought in our first cohort of interns at Netography over the summer, and it was just amazing to see how much they knew about security and software development, and just like compared to when I was early in my career, just how quickly they were able to jump in and be productive and contribute. Maybe before we get on to the next question, I know you've been hiring lately, Branden, as well, in a highly competitive area of our world. We've talked about, for years, the security skills shortage. Have you found it easier or harder to hire lately as compared to, maybe a couple of years back?
No, actually, I don't. I think part of the problem is that a lot of people when they're hiring are looking for those technical skills. And while technical skills are absolutely important for certain roles, a lot of it does come down to critical thinking or questioning attitude, being able to put stories together, especially when it comes to network security, right? Like understanding what the story is with these packets, what two machines are talking and why is equally as important as the alert or detection itself, right? You can fire alerts all day, but if you can't make a story out of those alerts, if you can't understand those alerts, then you're not really doing great, no matter how good your detection or programming skills are. And so, it really comes down to critical thinking. And so that's what we evaluate for most is, thought process, storytelling, the ability to communicate, less so than the technical skills that can be taught on the job.
I couldn't agree more. I think some of our highest performers came from a non-technical background, right? You can train tech, you can't train motivation, attitude, resilience, and just being part of the team. So I totally agree with that.
Great. Well, of course, part of why you all joined us on the call today, and we were able to recruit such great folks, is you're all using Netography Fusion and for some different use cases. So starting with you, Shannon, can you just give us a little bit of insight on why you chose Netography and how is it helping your team?
Dave, this is like throwing me the softball, right? I mean, this is just, I'm a broken record when it comes to some of this stuff. But I mean, bottom line, and maybe it goes back to those things that we talked about earlier, right? Scale and platform and those just abilities to, like Troy said, right? Come on board so fast. Netography really did that to us. We were doing other things in the past, and it was time consuming. It was batch based. It was, it was slow, and we weren't able to get the kind of detections that we could get. Or really, in my mind, the biggest win here is the visibility that we just never had before. So, in the past, it was, take an example. I've got a cloud infrastructure account, and I've got to go through this big process to onboard it. Now I can literally onboard an organization, if I want to use like AWS terms, and everybody's just onboarded. It's not a slow step process. And detections are fast. The platform is super fast. I don't remember. I think we're doing 4 or 5 different infrastructure providers, not to mention private data centers. It's SaaS, so I don't have to maintain infrastructure. I mean, I could keep going about this, Dave, but I tell you, cost is a pretty interesting factor as well. I mean, Dave, don't tell the rest of your people, but Netography was a lot cheaper than some of that other packet capturing things we were doing. But even more interesting, we use Netography to help us see where we're spending costs, not just incident detection, right? We use it because your infrastructure providers nowadays are charging for packets to move across the wire, and I can get better visibility out of a tool like Netography than I can with other ones, mostly because I can supplement that data, right? I can say, hey, what are your AWS bits? And anyways, but I'll tell you, Dave, probably one of the biggest pieces is you truly partner with your customers, fill their needs. Troy had the great story. He had a need, you guys listen, you partner, and you deliver, and it's constant. So I'm sure everybody else has great stories too.
Great.
Yeah, one of the great things that we loved about Netography was, I came from the DoD, right? Coming from the Navy, where we were doing full packet inspection, decryption, terminating TLS, right? You name it, we did it all. And then moving over to the private sector, where that's not really necessary for most of the stuff that we were doing. And so Netography was that great balance between privacy and security. And like I said earlier, it needs to be able to tell the story, right? My team should already be able to understand why this machine is talking to that machine. If we can't, that's something we should alert on, go figure it out, and fix it. And so, I don't necessarily need the full packet details, because I should have that everywhere else to be able to build that story. So the privacy and security balance was a big thing that I'm sure there are other vendors out there that can do that, but a lot of them were trying to sell me this full, deep packet inspection that I didn't need, and at a cost I wasn't willing to pay.
Yeah, just to double tap on all of that. I think it's so important to note some of the advantages here, right? I think this industry was ripe for disruption. When we talk about network detection and response, we're really talking about inspecting that network layer, not just north and south from the internet side to our employees and data center, but also east-west, right? So being able to see lateral movement, we talked about, Branden, you mentioned the AI, and so we assume breach. That's the zero trust mentality. We assume that somebody's going to get phished or click a link, or they're going to get vished. And now deepfakes are very scary, by the way. We've actually seen those in use here, like an attempt to use a YouTube video of a deepfake to trick people. And that's only going to get worse. But I think that, we assume our user base at some point is going to get tricked or click, and they're going to allow something in. And it's really that second, third, and fourth layer of investigation that you have to be cognizant of: the lateral movement, the privilege escalation, and all the things that happen on the network inside after that breach happens. And so that's why Netography is so important to us, giving us that visibility that we didn't have before and the scale we didn't have before. We're in over 100 countries. And so being able to tie that all back to our backhaul and our data centers, plus, with the SaaS, explosion and really this hybrid model of going to be cloud native, being able to see that traffic in all those different lenses, both from an internal to external and also internal to internal perspective, is so important for us. Not having to deploy an appliance. I cannot underscore how important it is to call that out over and over. You're not putting a port or a span tap in or something on a switch that you're having to put an appliance in a rack somewhere. That alone was enough to get me excited about this when Barrett Lyon was talking about this years ago. Secondarily to that, time to value. When you point the net flow, the S flow at this, and you're able to get some instant interpretations of that data within minutes and see it on a graph. That's just the beginning of increasing visibility. Now, with visibility increase comes, I have to answer for all of this. So we have an entire team here that breaks down the findings, the vulnerabilities, the detections, and then classifies them so that we know how to respond to them. Because there's this big fear that if we increase our visibility, we have to increase our teams to remediate at an equal pace. And I think that that's just kind of a little bit of wrong mentality in some cases, because you want to know that risk, even if you have to prioritize it and not get to it. You'd rather know the risk you have and be able to quantify that than to sit with a blind spot that you don't have. So to that point, I think it's really important to call that out. And this disruption of this industry, I think it's important to call out that this is the future. As we'll talk a little bit later about Amazon Security Lake and some of the future of security, correlation, threat detection, analysis, and decoupling our data layer from our analytics. I see Netography in that same lens. This is the future. You're decoupling your network detection and response from an appliance. And I think that's so important to really call out that differentiation.
So as a platform, sorry, Dave, but as a platform, when you have something like this, and I'll take our example, right? We're ingesting cloud data, XDR data, CNAP data, honeypot data, threat research data, all into one thing. It's really become, the go-to when you see something odd, right? Maybe like Branden said, machine talking to something that wouldn't normally. It's become kind of the go-to. But what you also led into there, Troy, was we have kind of a story that we're wondering around here. Is this sort of the death of the SIM in the future, right? I mean, people are ingesting flow logs, for instance, into SIMs, and that's ridiculous, right? Where if I can ingest into something like, let Netography worry about that massive scale, and we only deal with the small output. I think it's going to be an interesting example across the board.
I'd love to take a quick poke at that, Branden, because I think if you look at a couple of different solutions, Query AI comes to mind, where we talk about federated search, being able to dashboard your data and query it where it lives. In other words, not having to move data to query it and bring it in for that telemetry. That it has expanded our aperture to be able to see more without moving data or incurring the cost of ingestion. That's number one. Number two is, we all have regulations that say you must keep this type of data for this long. So you're going to need a place to put that data. And I think Amazon Security Lake at their $0 ingest is the place to put it. Now, the key to the success of the Security Lake is really the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework, OCSF. That means any data that gets ingested into the Security Lake is in a common format that we all can agree on. IP address is an IP address, a source, a destination. So you're able to query that data much faster at scale and at speed because it's normalized. You don't have to do those translations. And so I think the future of SIM really is security lake with a query AI on top of it, powered by, threat intelligence from someone like Tego Cyber. So that's my vision of the future for SIM and security operations. Add to that Netography and the future of network detection response. And I got to tell you, my IT teams love Netography, right? We purchased it for a complete security use case, but it's being used every day to find, gaps in our system, misconfigured routers, bandwidth issues. That was not part of the equation when we signed up, but it has certainly become a day-to-day operational thing that our teams are using. So a lot of value here. This is definitely where I think this industry is going, but I might be jaded.
No, I think I'm with you. The whole analytics model is exactly where we've been adventuring in. And I think you're right. It's really crazy how, Snowflake or Amazon or whatever you decide to use, they're allowing you to put this data in at such a marginal cost and then giving you the tooling to do something on top of that. It's a game changer too. But
yeah, I was working with one of our newest customers, and it's interesting how the promise of SIM and aggregating all of this data just flipped on its head to how do I not put the data into the SIM because it's costing me so much, and how that's created these other solutions and architectures around data lakes.
exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
let me open this one up to anyone who wants to answer this. Where do you think the industry is going to move next? We're certainly making progress on this concept of network defense and moving from on-prem to the cloud. Here at Netography with our network defense platform, we're still making our way into getting broader adoption of this across the industry, but certainly there's a lot of different aspects of the overall security ecosystem.
I'm gonna leave that one for Branden because I think I talked a lot the last one. I'll go right ahead, sir.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. One of the things that I'm super excited about that I love to play with myself that isn't getting a ton of broad adoption yet is eBPF, right? Getting more in there at the packet filtering at the kernel level, making more decisions real time at the box based off that. There's a lot of things going on in that space that I'm excited about. But like Troy already touched on, a lot of things with data lakes, query AI, seeing more AI-based tools to help with your analytics to cut down on analyst time. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. And I think that we'll see that in the next 1 to 2 years, especially as things start to continue to evolve with AI models, more fine-tuning, more hobbyists. I play with that stuff all the time here in my home lab. I just wish I had more hardware to do it more often.
One of the other big game changers that I think is becoming really interesting is you have these, sort of zero trust was a first, network in the cloud, really. There's a lot of people who are talking about it, but cloud gateways and next gen firewalls in the cloud now, right? We're back to, get rid of these appliances. Let's start moving to these other platforms because they can scale and I don't have to worry about that. And I think that's going to continue to bring some interesting challenges, but huge advantages for us, right? Because it can be so quick to deploy. So.
Yeah, I think, and as far as I see the future of cybersecurity, Branden, you touched on it exactly. We are not going to be, AI is not coming for your job as an analyst, but we're going to empower you with better information, faster queries to do higher level tasks and get rid of the mundane everyday, thing that you're spending hours doing, right? That I'm excited about. AI is going to have a huge impact on what we're doing. We're seeing threat actors now take 0-day vulnerabilities and having an exploit available to them in hours, where we used to have at least a buffer of a week or so to get that patched and in line. So, we're going to have to adjust our timelines in the future for how the threat actors are using AI. The other thing that I'm really excited about is Charlotte over at CrowdStrike and Purple at SentinelOne. I think you're going to see more companies like that coming out with their own large language models that are based upon your security data. So using your data to train the LLM and get those insights into, a natural language query engine or something along those lines are going to help security analysts not have to be experts in writing SPL or other types of queries across their landscape and being able to really drive deep in that data they already have, because it's those top rare or those top offenders that you really want to focus in on. But imagine putting all that data into an AI engine and seeing those anomalies at scale. It's exciting. Now, we've heard AI and ML in every sales pitch since 2011, right? This is not new in the vernacular of what we are used to. I want to see a certification body that says this tool actually is artificial intelligence. It's not just marketing on a PowerPoint slide. and something that tells me that I can have confidence that they're doing it. But also, IPG is a member of the Partnership on AI, which is a bias and detection engine to help to do I guess all of the things that you not want to make sure that you're doing when you're deploying AI, so that it's not biased. You have all these checks in place, not just from a data perspective, but that you're not doing deterministic or non-deterministic type of queries that have unknown bias or inherent bias to them. So that's important to us. And so as we look at the future, I think that we all in this room have our hands full to kind of understand and keep on top of the latest developments and be able to separate the fiction from the nonfiction and the FUD from the non-FUD. So that's where I think we're going as an industry. One of the biggest places I think we need attention, if I can be honest and say what I think the future needs to have, is a consolidation in the identity market. We have so many different identity vendors and silos of, admin, privileged access management. You've got the user identity, you've got machine identities, you've got SaaS identities and cloud identities. And I don't think anybody's really doing a really great job of doing it all under a single pane of glass and doing that entire life cycle journey of an identity from, cradle to grave. I think we need to see a consolidation there, and somebody handled that really well. I'd love to see that as a deficiency on our report card industry. Please listen, you need to go fix this. So that's my 2 cents.
A lot of conversation today around trying to move away from the appliances, and kind of maps back to what you were saying, Troy, at the start around, how do you deploy in the Middle East in a matter of hours, having sold security appliances that I had built in a past life, and just having to deal with how are we going to ship that? What's the export? Can we actually get the appliance there? Has been an ongoing challenge. But also really interesting to hear what your organization has been doing around AI. Troy or Branden, anything around kind of policy or from a kind of a risk or governance perspective, how you're thinking about when and how do you bring AI into the organization, or what are the worries that the company or the risk officers might have?
I love this question because it's an ongoing question everywhere, right? And a lot of it comes down to, who controls the model, who controls the data, what does that data flow look like? Are they training on my data? Who else has access to it, right? So there's a lot of things there, but in general, we support AI initiatives, right? We want to use them. They are the future. It is the right path forward, but those discussions need to be had regardless, right? It's not anything new with security. It's the same concept, right? Who's controlling the data? Where's it going? How's it being used? What regulations apply to it? Not to get too much into AI training here, but in order to create a model, it had to ingest that data. So now, is that data subject to regulations and laws? So how do you purge that data? Like GDPR, for example. If I trained it on PII, how do I purge the PII from that model? So things like that just need to be discussed in whatever the implementation is. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I agree. I think we don't know enough yet to set certain policies or demands. We empower our user base to use AI tools, especially in the advertising and marketing industry, which we live in. AI is empowering us to be faster and better and to create brand voice for our clients. We need to do it ethically, and that was the word I was searching for earlier. I couldn't think of. We need to do it ethically, and we need to make sure we do it in line with our brands and their voice. But I think that as a security team, we also have to be very careful that the data doesn't eat its own tail, so to speak, that the output from the AI is being ingested again as the new data set. And so that's important that you understand the foundational model that you're using and what the training and all the different parameters are that are going into it. So I think this is an ongoing discussion. As it relates to regulation, I'm very fortunate to have a great relationship with our legal team here at IPG. We have a very robust privacy and geographic privacy team that can help me understand the implications, like in Germany and France, where they have really strict, European Union GDPR and Works Council type concerns about this. I think that we're going to continue to learn and understand more about that as time goes on, as Branden mentioned. And we may see regulation come out. We'll respond to that appropriately. But I think we as a security team really need to be making sure that our analysts aren't putting proprietary information out there in these models, understand that they're public and they can that information can be seen by others. We've cautioned our employees we're not taking away their access to it, but we're really cognizant of that data loss risk.
Yeah, Troy, I think that's huge, right? And especially with your typical, Chat GPT. To be honest, their terms of services and what they do with your data, it doesn't really work in our security business, right? They're very open about sharing that data. So there's a lot that has to be thought about when you're allowing your people to use it. But I couldn't agree more. If you're not using it, you're probably falling behind.
Yeah, and we're dealing with the same thing here at Netography, and just got a pitch yesterday from a new startup who had some new algorithms around AI, and some of the first questions is, okay, but where's the data going? Can we run it within our instance? How is this going to affect our SOC 2 audit? All of those concerns, which we know all of our customers have.
Very true.
Let's move to some audience questions here, and this first one is for Shannon. Can you share a few examples of some things that flow monitoring can or has told you about your environment? And are you doing that monitoring both for physical networks and in the cloud?
Oh my gosh. This is really, we don't have enough time. Yes. So multi-data center, multi-cloud vendors, or multi-accounts in multiple clouds. So all over the place is where we do this. We do this because it's just that easy. But I mean, even things like we're on a path to make our offices be essentially your Starbucks, right? Your coffee shop, because we don't believe that they should have access to data. So we're using Netography to tell us, who's transporting data across some of those connections that we think shouldn't be, or maybe some legacy connections. We use Netography to tell. I talked earlier, right, about how we're better determining where our cost usage is coming from, and instead of trying to rely on infrastructure provider scenarios. We've done a lot of migrations in the past, and we're actually in the midst of some migrations right now where we're consolidating some data center footprint. We pull up Netography and we say, hey, this server is talking to A, B, and C. Now we need to move all of those as a bundle over. So tons of examples I could give you where we're using it beyond just a security platform. But obviously there's huge security stories there.
Yeah, and just to tap on that, I think we're using it both on premise. We focused on our physical links first, our data center to data center, our backhauls, our main offices, but we're just now exploring AWS and Google and Microsoft in the cloud, and I think we're seeing some initial tremendous value there. The question is how fast, how far, and how wide do we want to scale it? And I'm letting the teams kind of have a look at the data and determine that. But I think that the use cases have already aligned themselves to our initiatives in the cloud for software security, for hardening our infrastructure, for security posture management, for data security posture management, and those data flows. So I'm excited about the future of expanding that in the cloud.
And it's there, it's easy, right? I can tell you, OCI, Azure, Amazon, we even were in IBM for a little while, and that's one of those great stories, right? We onboarded IBM, we turned around and decommed it when we decided to move away from that. So it's just so easy to get into those cloud spaces. So, huge win for us.
Great. Next audience question. This one's for Troy. You mentioned other teams are also using and loving Netography, such as IT. What about the NOC or network engineering? Is that a piece of the equation for you?
Yeah, I don't think the NOC has expanded into that. Might be a good recommendation. I know the people that on the IT side who really love it are our network engineers and the folks who have to manage the inter-office bandwidth and routing. I think they've seen initially, with the help of Netography engineers, we found some misconfigured routers that, we were having just saturation across certain links and couldn't figure out why. Netography was able to point that out to us. But, the NOC is a great example. I took a note on that one because I think the Network Operations Center could certainly use it. They rely a lot on SolarWinds, but that's really up-down monitor. They're not seeing the true throughput. And so I think this would be a good addition to their toolkit.
Yeah, it's been a huge win for networking across all pillars of networking in our organization. They're just amazed how much more visibility that they can get as opposed to, your perfect example, SolarWinds in the past, right? So huge win for us.
I think we have time for one more question, and this one we'll start with Branden. I know you have a born in the cloud organization there with some huge growth and scale. How do you compare how you're using Netography and what it's able to do for you versus some of the other products in the cloud security market, whether that be CSPM or CASB or what else you may be using there.
Yeah, that's a great question. So CSPM is a very broad category of tooling, right? And you could even say that, you know, portions of that could be considered Netography, right? So CSPM, I mean, you use it to monitor your infrastructure, your cloud usage, cloud configurations, all those kinds of things, and that's great. There's definitely a fit there. We use those tools all the time, but there's other things outside the cloud that we're still communicating with. We might be in the cloud, but what about other people that are also in the cloud that are separate network connections, right? So everything that we're talking to. For example, we used Netography to kind of do an overlay of our network with our infrastructure and see, like, I literally took the IP Explorer, right, and rearranged those labels there so that my infrastructure was here, everything going out was over there, overlaid it to our network diagrams, and we're able to see, like, why is this device talking to GitHub? I didn't have the story there. I went to my engineering team. There was actually a story. It should have been doing it the whole time. Added it to my list of knowns, right? But we were able to see all of those things by using Netography, where like a CSPM is more focused on the activity within your own cloud, not necessarily when you're reaching out to other people's clouds.
Excellent. Any other cloud use cases of that you've picked up, either from Shannon or Troy?
I mean, we tie it all together, right? I mean, we take the things that the CSPM finds and we shove it into Netography, and that gives my, you know, SOC or whoever it happens to be, even the NOC, right? It gives them the ability to open one console and I can see where there's traffic maybe going on, but now I can overlay that with my CSPM data. And so they can quickly see, oh, wait, this is a machine that, you know, might have a vulnerability or might have an external exposure, and there really is stuff going on. I think it's really a complementary component there. So.
Yeah, and I think we're still a little green on that. I'm taking some notes from our conversation here. You know, we really tried to replace traditional NDR. You know, think of your extra hops, your dark traces, and things like that. What I call legacy appliance-based detections. And so that's kind of where my team's head was and the network team's head. They understood that. It made sense because that was something they've seen before. They've used it before. I think all of these use cases for delivering WIS data into Netography or to get, you know, more exposure in AWS will be huge for us. And that's something I'll explore after this call for sure.
Great. Yeah, no, it's been great working with Wiz on our technology integration there, and just seeing how that combination of value has been able to create some new use cases for our customers, and how knowing the vulnerability state of a system and then connecting that to the actual traffic going to and from it has created some really interesting analytics for the Security Operations Center. Well, I want to thank you so much for all of you joining today, and all of the audience who's watching live or later on demand. Thanks so much, and have a great day.
Right on.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.